Really.
Right. All right, thanks everyone for joining. I see we have quite a lot of people online. Great turnout. Thanks a lot for making the time, and even so, we have some people from the US, so it's great that we have a varied audience. My name is Renku. I'm leading the Renku development here at the Swiss Data Science Center. So for today, we wanted to give a quick update, both to maybe people who are not familiar with Renku, but also those who have used Renku before or have heard about the project over the last several years, because we think that what we have in store for 2024 is quite significantly different from what has been there so far. So we want to kind of prepare everybody for the changes that are coming up. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we arrived here, so more on the conceptual level. But then also we have Ralph who will talk about the more technical side of things, and Laura who will give a short preview of what we've already done so far and what is coming more concretely this year. So the mission of the Renku project or the Renku platform doesn't really change. Our goal is, as before, to facilitate sustainable data science. And what we mean here by sustainable is data science that is done in a way that keeps openness, reusability, reproducibility in mind, so that it can be useful and used also next month or in 6 months or in a few years. And our way of doing this is basically to try and capture this knowledge of how data science projects are put together, where this is happening, where it is created, to make ideally reusability automatic as much as possible and not added work. So yeah, Renku has been around for quite some time. I think even some current people in the team have never seen this UI in the bottom left there. This is from a few years ago, but it's evolved quite a lot over the years, though our guiding principles have more or less stayed the same. But most importantly, I think we've learned a lot from our users, from our conversations with various research groups, from feedback that we've gotten. And so we decided this year that it was time to actually make a pretty significant change to the platform. Now, maybe going back to where we're coming from and how we're approaching this, we think about this really as basically bringing knowledge upwards through this pyramid. And at the bottom of this pyramid, we have individual researchers that actually do the work on the data. And when we listen to them, we talk to them about what their friction points are and what their incentives are. They want to basically get their work done, but they also don't want to spend, for example, extra time rerunning their code that they wrote some time ago, and they want to be able to reuse work or let other people reuse their work. And they want to be able to share things with minimal friction, for example. So this is sort of the layer that is, so to speak, foundational for us. And this is where we've been also focusing a lot of our efforts recently. But our belief is that if we manage to nail down sort of what drives this layer at the bottom and how we can improve the situation there, then the information that we can collect there can be brought up to these other layers. So, for example, on the organizational layer, the lab manager or the PI of a group wants to make sure that the work that they do is not wasted. When new people join a group, they want to be able to showcase the work of their group and so on. And yet, higher up, we think about what happens on a level of the community or, for example, a funding body. And these people, again, have different motivations. So they want to understand how researchers from different domains might be able to connect, or how funding money is being spent. So taking all this together is the sort of system that we're trying to put in place. But again, back to the sort of foundational layer here, the foundational audience. this is the individual computational researcher that is interested in, in pretty blunt terms, they want to run code on data, right? But we know that they're not alone. They're embedded in this bigger group of people. Nobody ever works alone on these projects. And this group also has certain needs and demands and viewpoints. So for example, they want to share their research with potentially less technical collaborators. They maybe need to share resources among their group. And they have to probably at some point answer to some group leader or PI that wants to also see how this work is being carried out. So in our sort of original design of Renku, or original implementation of this vision, we thought, okay, let's really think about this individual and how they work, and go directly to where code is consuming data and producing data, and let's try to capture these connections and make them available, and index them, and try to do something with it. So that if we can capture how one person does this, then we can capture a second person's process, and maybe we can see that they've taken off from somebody else's work, taken somebody's output, created their input, and made new work out of this, created new value out of this chain. And if we place them into this sort of Renku container, so to speak, we'll be able to have this environment where these interactions can be expressed. People can use this for search and discovery of potentially new methods, or new methods on old data, or vice versa. And so, this could create this sort of nice environment for everyone. Of course, what led to problems was that our users did in fact care about this, they do care about this, but they also come with resources that come outside of this Renku box, right? So they already are embedded in communities, they're already embedded in different types of research infrastructure, and they want to bring those things with them. And with the current design of Renku, this was just not very easy, or potentially not even at all achievable. So we've now kind of taken a step back and rethought how we can make this happen. So we know that there's a very rich ecosystem. So we have, on the one hand, we have the data repositories, we have code repositories, we have data stores, we have compute infrastructure, and we have an extremely heterogeneous group of researchers that all come with their own needs. And we're thinking, okay, how can we put together kind of a baseline, a base platform that tries to now pull some of these pieces together. And by the way, here this is somewhat, in some of these slides were a bit Swiss-centric, because that's where our funding comes from, obviously. But this is not to say that, or even ETH domain-centric, but this is not to say that this is limited to Switzerland or the ETH domain. This just happens to be where our primary use cases are coming from for the time being. So if we now reconsider these two users, they might have some data in some cloud store, they might have some data in a data repository, they might be working with some institutional GitLab instance or some GitLab repositories, and they might have compute already available to them, maybe on an HPC cluster, or some other cloud provider. And now the interesting part is, and actually what's causing a lot of friction in these collaborations where we talk to people, is that they have no real way of consolidating all these things together and actually, passing the torch from one person to the next. So what we've been conceptualizing and actually already putting into action over the past months is sort of a new version of this Renku vision, in which Renku plays the role of this connector between these different pieces of the research ecosystem. So, for example, in this quote-unquote new Renku, we should be able to take some published data set. Of course, there will be some way of then also informing these repositories that this data set is now in Renku, right? You'll be able to take this data set, combine it with some code repository that you already have, or maybe you've written new code, but in a place that you control, run it on some infrastructure, some compute infrastructure, and then maybe push it to some other storage. And to do this all within a system that allows you then to actually pass this information about where all these connections are coming from to your collaborator or to another member in your research group or however else that needs to be done. So I'm done. Should we pause for questions in the middle or at the end?
Sure.
Are there any questions online right away, or can we continue? All right, so I'll pass it on to Laura.
All right. Hi, for those of you I've not had the pleasure of meeting yet, I am Laura. I am the team's product manager. And so to dig in a little more detail in the concrete details of Renku 2, what we're calling Renku 2.0, and I'm going to have the pleasure of showing you the first sneak preview of what it looks like. But to start, we have two guiding ideas behind Renku 2.0. The first is to connect the research ecosystem, so integrating code repositories, data sources, and compute infrastructure across this ecosystem that Rob was just describing. And then a second kind of UX goal is to provide a more flexible plug and play project structure so you can mix and match code, data, and compute as you need them, and match a greater variety of the ways that research projects operate. So I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what Renku 2.0 looks like. Before I do want to emphasize that we're still in the early stages of developing this new version of Renku. So the designs that I'm about to show you are certainly not final. They're definitely subject to further iterations and changes. That said, we are dedicated to incorporating UX research into our development cycle. So the designs that I'm about to show you have already been subject to nearly a dozen user testing sessions, and we can hope to continue that going forward. So without further ado, this is what the new Renku will look like, at least mostly. So the design for Renku 2.0 is grounded on these ideas of these research components, these research artifacts that build up a project. So we have the compute sessions, data sources, and code repositories here front and center at a glance. So you might see that in terms of data sources, we have two here. So not limited to one, you could have many or none. And we have integrations with external systems. So we have a data set coming from Zenodo and another one from S3. So we plan to incorporate, to build integrations with data repositories for import and export for both ways, and also support for cloud storage and other data systems for like Scratch workspace. And then of course we have code repositories. Again, when kind of changing one fundamental rule of Renku Lab, which is that a project may have more than one code repository as part of it, may even have none. And again, you can integrate repositories that are coming from Renku Lab's internal GitLab, but also from external code repositories. Can be integrated in the same project. Then we have sessions. So Renku 2.0 continues to offer one-click interactive sessions. And once again, we can mix and match the resources that we need. So say, for example, you're working on a project and you prefer to work in R, but you have a collaborator who's working in Python. You can define multiple interactive sessions for one project that all collaborators have access to and can reuse. So here we have the kind of a full project. We are also planning on building out a guided setup for this project to help people get started. So this is what this might look like. So we can start by adding the usual details for our project, and then adding code repositories to that project, either creating a new code repository or connecting an existing code repository, either from Renku Lab or elsewhere. Adding data sources. So as I said earlier, either from data repositories or from cloud storage systems. And then lastly, configuring the sessions for your project. So we imagine we will be offering some pre-configured environments that you can easily get started with. Or you can configure the session environment from a project repository similar to how it works now, or maybe you want to bring in a custom image that you have defined elsewhere to use in your session for Renku Lab. We also imagine that for those who are familiar with Renku and know exactly what they want, they can get started straight from a blank slate project page. But so the design is grounded on these components, and we also imagine that in Renku 2.0, that we will be able to offer reusing each of these components more granularly between projects. So say, for example, you're working in a particular domain. I have a little example here drawn up. Say you're working in the education domain, studying factors that contribute to educational attainment. With Renku Lab's new search, you could search for something in that domain and see not only the projects that are in that area, but also all of the components that are connected to those projects. So here we can see the person who is working on this project. We can see the data sets in the repository. Each has their own entities that are available for search and discovery and reuse. So for example, we might open up and inspect a data set in an interactive environment, take a look at it, and then see if we want to add it to our own project. Or we could look at the individual and see what other work they have done. All right, so to summarize, again, they come back to these two foundational principles for Renku 2.0. The first is to connect the research ecosystem, so connecting also different research infrastructures and helping reducing the project overhead for researchers in getting started on their projects and doing that groundwork setup work, but also preserving metadata as these artifacts move between systems so they can be traced and reused effectively. And I want to highlight here that the team's already won 2 ORD grants for connecting data repositories and compute across the ETH domain, which we're very excited about. A little more practically speaking, this means that in Renku 2.0, you can connect all the resources that you need in a Renku project, whether that be a GitHub repository or an S3 bucket and beyond. And second guiding principle being offering a flexible plug and play project structure, taking the form of a new redesigned project page with a step-by-step setup and a search where you can trace code data environments between projects. So again, I'm going to pause there for any questions. Yes, John Park.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for sharing. Quick question, maybe it's already been covered. From the first feel that I get of Renku 2.0 is that it's very much Renku Lab, and that is it's restricted to the browser, and it's somewhat still tied to the cloud resources that you are providing, even though the idea is that it should be much more like between data repos, compute, and everything. And we know that it's somewhat of a bottleneck, for example, to take the example of compute, where very quickly 1 CPU or 0.25 is not enough. I was wondering, to get to the point very quickly, I mean, you might understand it. So would it make sense to keep the same UI UX of Renku Lab and have some sort of web assembly so as to use local compute, or even on an HPC, somebody is logging in via the browser and using Renku. So remaining within the same browser experience, you use the different computes available and not necessarily rely on the switch-based cloud resources. Does that make sense, first of all?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that we do have much more imagined for Renku 2.0, and I'll get into that a little bit when I touch on the roadmap. So there's more to Renku 2.0 that we don't have reflecting in these particular designs. So for example, we do have some work planned for later in this year for doing a proof of concept of how we could integrate Renku Lab with HPC and other cloud compute. So for those who are visual, like I am, I can imagine configuring a session, and one of the fields here would be what compute infrastructure this session is configured to work on, whether that be Renku Lab or an HPC cluster, or otherwise.
Yeah, right. So I mean, geeks, nerds, or whoever is familiar with the command line will always get to use Renku. That's no problem. I mean, it's usually the onboarding of people who have these problems in researchers in general, they would be comfortable with having the same experience, Renku Lab experience on their laptops, using the local compute to do quick sandboxing, or to HPCs also, and keeping the same environment. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Maybe I can add to this. We currently already offer SSH on the current Renku Lab, and we plan to continue enabling SSH connections to sessions, so you can work kind of locally, but it still runs in the session. And we're also planning to have a new dedicated CLI that allows you to, check out some of those resources if you want to work locally, and to also bridge that gap a bit, so you don't need to work directly in the browser. We don't have plans currently for the WebAssembly idea to kind of run the Renku Lab UI locally, but we aim for a similar experience using CLI tools, SSH, and those kinds of things.
Thanks.
So we have 2 more questions in the comments. Richard, do you want to speak up, or do you want me to read out the questions?
Sure. Hi, Rock. Yeah, I can read this. I just thought I'd put them in the chat. Yeah, I was just wondering, what does this new project design mean for the portability of Renku projects between different instances of Renku, and also, I suppose, like the old project concept, and you could kind of pull the whole thing down to your laptop, but in the new version, that's a bit less clear to imagine how that would work. Yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we want to have a CLI that integrates with like our APIs, but allows you to do like all of these things, like running a local session or mounting a data set, checking or cloning your repositories locally and pushing back metadata to the platform. And we also envision that you will be able to like export and import all of the metadata in some easily readable format, just to keep it portable and not have it like locked into the platform.
Okay, yeah. So you have some kind of idea for a schema to describe what the project would look like, so you could just do an import export now that it's not all just living in a Git repository.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then the second question I put in the chat there was, if sessions are defined independently of sort of a specific code repository now, then like what's the relationship between sessions and code repositories? Because it seems like you can now have a situation where those are out of sync, and there's quite a lot of value I see in having the environment description and the code that runs in that environment very tightly coupled.
Yeah, so the plan is to continue to offer the route you are describing, where the session configuration is defined in a code repository. And then the only way it would not is if the session environment is defined in another very specific place. So for example, one of the predefined images that are offered by Renku Lab, or another image defined in another project. So this is something that we still have a lot more work to develop these ideas, but I can imagine that is also could have strong metadata associated with where that session definition is coming from, if it's not coming from the option via the option of being defined by a code repository.
I think if I can add to that a little bit. So yeah, I think especially with multiple repositories involved and multiple sources of environments, this becomes much less well-defined than it currently is. We think that this will be nice because it's more flexible and it actually allows you to reuse the same environments between different projects, for example, or a community can have environments that are useful for them. One thing we discussed has not been designed or really thought about deeply, but one thing that potentially could be done there is to have some sort of checkpointing feature or something like this, where you'd be able to say, okay, now I want to mark my project at a certain point, and these are all the things that were used at this point in time for the project. So it's kind of documented what you need for that particular time. Something like this might be useful, I think.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I think my concern was kind of arising from imagining a scenario where I have an environment that's sort of separately defined from my code, and then I run or multiple environments that are separately defined from the code. So then I can run the same code in two different environments, potentially get different results, as it were. Whereas in the current situation, because they're defined in the same place, you kind of have to ensure that there's consistency in order for them to work. So you have a sort of baked in a guarantee of that to some degree. But it seems like that would be harder to ensure in the new architecture. For the sort of reuse question, I suppose the way that you'd think about that in the old model is just having templates, right? Where you have the project template that you can pick the environment from and create a new project on it, and then you have sort of a hard fork, as it were, where everything downstream of that is potentially different, but you can always sort of pull that back into a new template, fork off again. But I don't know. Yeah, is there a how are you thinking about templates in this new project model? That was another question.
Anybody want to think that?
Yeah.
I mean, we thought a bit about templates. In this project model, it definitely would be different, since it probably won't. I mean, right now it's just a Git repository, essentially a project template, but here we do want to design a bit around kind of cloning projects or copying them, though we haven't had many discussions around that. I just want to say that the old way of working, where you have your Docker file in a repository and build an image, like an environment from that will still work, as long as it's like, just for one repository.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We have a question from Luis.
Actually, I'm wondering how the linking between like data sources and code repositories happen. So if I create a new code repository inside a project, I can automatically assign like a couple of data sources that are going to be mounted automatically into that data repository, into that code repository.
Do you mean, so you'll be able to configure for a session which of the data sources and code repositories you want mounted into that session? Is that what you're referring to, Luis?
Well, perhaps, what I think is that there will be like just like some available data, and I just want to assign like a subset of those data sources to some specific like a new code repository, which is going to have some functions that are going to operate just on that subset. And how to then access to that data either on a session or locally.
I think you wouldn't tie the data source to the repository. You would bring them both into the same project, and then when you instantiate a working session to actually get your hands on the data and the code, then they will both be configured together for you. So either locally or in the cloud session.
Okay.
That didn't seem to
I think I
answer.
see. No, I think I see. I simply have to wrap my head. No, I mean, okay. Yeah, I think I sort of like understand, but yeah, we can chat further.
I think what's maybe unclear is that the sessions that you see on this page are probably quite different from in some extent, to the sessions that we have now, because each of the two lines for the sessions that Laura is showing there has a whole set of configurations where you can say, as Rock said, like these data sets and these repositories and this environment goes in this session. So then you know, if you want to have a project where you have a session for just exploring stuff and a session for training a model, you can do that, right? Like maybe for just looking at results, you don't need that many repositories. You don't need a super heavy environment. And you just want something simple and quick, and you pull those things in and you have one session. And then the other one is for really getting, you know, getting into the weeds and getting like doing a lot of work and stuff. So there you can pull in more data, you can pull in a heavier environment, and then you can also then share different things with different people.
Yeah, that definitely now clarifies a lot. So thanks, Tasco.
All right, do we have other questions? Doesn't seem like it. Do you want to
All right,
go on?
in that case, I'm going to literally pass the torch to Rex. Oh, and then, sorry, I didn't mean to say before I switched. So a lot of what I talked through, the points are here for reference as like bullet point slides for anyone who wants to come back to the slides. But you can skip through them now.
Okay.
Not intended to be talked through right now.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Ralph and I'm the technical lead on the Renku project, and I want to talk a bit about what's changing under the hood, how does the new architecture look like, especially for people that are familiar with how current Renku works. But I would like to kick that off first with a bit of a more technical motivation why we're also doing the Renku 2.0 change. Laura went into a lot of detail on the user-facing side, and it is like our key guiding principle to make it nicer to use for users. But one other aspect is definitely also to enable us to deliver more features for users more quickly. And for that, I would like to talk a little bit about current Renku and this kind of Renku as it is right now from a user's perspective. You have the CLI that works on a Git repository, right? And you just work in your Git repository. The repository itself contains your compute definition, your environment, your data sources. You push that to GitLab at some point. Renku does its magic, and yeah, you can do the same thing from a session with the CLI inside. And if we just focus right now on kind of the CLI or working on the Git repository, I want to make a small journey with just importing a data set. Let's say you want to import the data set, you saw someone else's Renku repository as a data set, you want to import that. Okay, you import the data set, you're happy, you work a bit, and after a while you would like to update that data set and figure out where is it coming from. So you look at that repository and you see, oh, that imports data sets from like 2 other Git repositories. Let me figure out which one this data set came from. It's actually not from the one where I imported it from. And after a bit, you see, oh, it's actually from this repository. So let me look at that one. And oh, that one actually originally comes from Zenodo. Okay, good. There is actually a new version of this data set. So I should just be able to do like Renku dataset update and update this. But now, you know, this path goes through like 3 repositories to an external thing. And now you realize actually this repository hasn't been touched in 3 years. It's like quite outdated. And it's kind of hard to update the data set through this. Maybe you need to get it directly from here. And this is like suddenly a lot of complexity to put on a user to get this mental model of how these connections work inside Renku. But this is only for one user that wants to add one data set to their project. From our side, it looks much more like this. Because you have like many repositories with connections between them, each of them containing their own metadata, which can be up to date, which could be last touched 5 years ago. And you're kind of Renku in the middle that needs to coordinate all those things, capture all those things, and present them in a way to a user that's easy to grasp, easy to work with. And so far, we've done a good job with that. It's actually quite amazing how well it works, given like this big complexity and everything. It just also makes development quite difficult because now I only mentioned data sets, but what if we had like storage and we need to have some model of storage like that's reused? You have much more pointers between those repositories for storage. Then you want to add like compute definitions inside repositories or other data sources and so on. And environments, if you want to reuse those and share them easily, it's just a very big amount of complexity to work around, to implement in a way that, you know, works well, doesn't have lots of bugs and so on. And that's also easy for users to kind of understand and figure out what's going on. And I haven't even talked about like branches in the Git repositories yet. So yeah. And in Renku 2.0, we really aim for more of this kind of picture where you access it from the outside with the CLI, with a browser. Renku is like this neat box that can keep track of all the metadata inside. It can make sure it's all up to date. We can, you know, keep all the metadata of all the projects on the current state. We don't suddenly roll out a new version the day before your big presentation or the day before your teaching course, and now you need to migrate or stuff doesn't work anymore. And on the other hand, we also can integrate like with data repositories, compute from the outside with good connectors. And we know once we implement this, it just works. We don't have to tell you, oh, you're on the wrong version of the CLI, this feature doesn't work there. It's like once we do it, it just works. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier in the top right, we also plan that you can like download this metadata to it offline, that it's like portable. So you still have a lot of the benefits that you have with current Renku. We also want to version the metadata inside the platform so you can see what happened over time. So don't lose the benefits of versioning it in Git. And yeah, with that, I want to talk a bit about current architecture. This is pretty much a snapshot of where we are at now. This will change over time. It doesn't include all the things that we want to do and so on, but it's just to give a bit of an overview of the things we are working on and what has changed. So the current CLI sadly will go. It's very tied to working on metadata stored in a Git repository, and it would just be too much effort to change that to something that works with Renku 2.0. But we do envision that we want to make a new CLI that is more streamlined for this new way of doing things. We have a lot of ideas on how to improve on, you know, the functionality that the current CLI had, just to make it more user-friendly, easier to use, and more portable as well. And then currently we also have the core service, which is the background service that deals with the Git repositories and the metadata inside. And that is also not needed anymore. Yeah, there's a couple of gray things here. Gray basically means we want to do this, we just haven't fully fleshed out how we will do it or what shape it will take. Like, as I said, the CLI will be new. SSH we currently support, but we have some ideas on how to streamline that much more and make it nicer. The knowledge graph for now, we still want to have a knowledge graph for all those connections that exposes that in a nice way, but we realized that we need to have a good platform first to then build a knowledge graph on top, not start from knowledge graph and work from there. And yeah, some of the new things, we now have the data services, which is like a single service that manages all the metadata, keeps it up to date, has a nice API that also makes it easier for people to interact with the platform. They don't need to know our internal storage format. They can just send REST requests to interact with it. And on the other hand, you have the search service, which is also new, which is like Solar under the hood, which enables just really fast searching on the platform of all those things that are there. So you don't need to wait 20 seconds to see what data set is there or something like that. But we are really aiming to make this like really snappy and fast. And yeah, on the right side, you have kind of compute storage, data repositories, and Git providers from outside Renku that we want to integrate with. And yeah, this is pretty much it where we are at now with new components, but I do expect this to change quite a bit in the coming year. And yeah, that's already it from my side.
Pause for any questions for Ralph? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Rob.
All right, then, time to talk timelines. So we've been talking a lot about conceptually what is Renku 2.0. And now I want to talk about some of the concrete details of what you can expect from us. So we are already well underway with building up Renku 2.0. So everything over here on the left is are parts of Renku 2.0 that we've already finished building. So we have some basic project and user namespaces and groups concepts. If I were to show you Renku 2.0 right today, you would be able to connect repositories, launch sessions from predefined images, and you'd be able to use our nice new speedy fast search. However, it does not look as pretty as what I showed you in the designs because we actually only just wrapped up our user research cycle for developing that design, and we'll be implementing it in the coming months. So that's why we're not showing you something live. Also coming ahead in the next couple of months, we're working towards opening a beta of Renku 2.0. We really care about learning from our users, so we'd really like to make Renku 2.0 available as soon as we can as a minimum viable product. That said, to make sure I set expectations realistically, when I talk about opening a beta, this is a version of Renku 2.0 that only has a small set of features so far and still missing many more features and functionality that we planned to add to it in the coming months and the rest of the year. So don't expect a kind of Renku that is feature parity with the current Renku just yet by this time. But as part of that, we'll be expecting to be able to connect with not only repositories inside GitLab, the Renku Lab internal GitLab, but with other GitLab instances, as well as connecting to cloud storage, much as like you can in current Renku Lab. And then we also have lots of work ahead. And here's where I'd like to hopefully perk your ears if there's any of these concepts that sound interesting to you or that you have ideas and feedback. We'd really love to hear from you. We'll go over a number of ways you can work with us in the very next slide. So you're aware of what's on our radar. We want to totally rethink how data sets work in Renku Lab, as well as integrating with data repositories. And so we are planning on doing another dedicated user research cycle, at least one around that theme. We'd love to have your participation. A couple of other items that we know are sometime coming in the next year are the ability to customize session environments. We know users definitely need to be able to do that, not just bringing images, predefined images. We also hope to make it possible to publish and share and reuse environment definitions between projects. We plan to offer secret storage, so saving credentials, for example, for storage or for databases for use in sessions. As we've mentioned a couple of times, porting over the SSH functionality with some improvements. And then we have lots of other larger topics like reimagining the CLI and doing a proof of concept around integrating with HPC. So in this sense, making Renku more modular, not just in the code and the data, but also the compute resources that it can connect to. So any questions? Okay. Do you want to ask? Yeah.
So, as a last point from the presentation today, I would like to share with you how can we stay connected. As Laura mentioned before, a large portion of, so we listen to the users, Renku team listens to the users, and a large portion of what we have presented today is inspiration also from the feedback that we have received along these 5 years that Renku exists. So we offer you to participate in our user experience research. If you would be willing to participate on that, please reach out to us through our email account. We also offer you to test the Renku 2.0 beta version starting in June. Again, reach out to us via our email. We had a very successful Renku users meeting last year in September. We plan to repeat and also offer it widely to the broader audience for end of June. We have already opened the registration. We will share the presentation afterwards, so you can also access the link. And you can also check out our public design docs if you also want to have further insights into what is happening. We have given further, we have reactivated our social media to reach you out. So we have opened a Fastodon account for Renku. We also have created and are creating more content for our blog. And as usual, any issues and any announcements are also published in Renku Discourse. And we will publish this video in our YouTube channel. And you're also very welcome to forward this video or any other content to your colleagues that may have not had the occasion to join us today. This being said, I would like to thank you all for your attendance. Yeah, open for any other further question that we have. If there is not,
I don't know, perhaps briefly coming back on to the idea of data, you said that you are going to revamp a bit the databases or the data sets in Renku. I don't know, do you have any idea what you think could be changed or what you think worked the worst before?
You want to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. I think in current Renku, many users use datasets as like an easy way to like share data between projects, but not really in the sense of a published dataset. And moving forward, we would much rather have more of a concept of some storage that you can share, like some scratch space, basically, if you just want to move data around, and to treat datasets more as something that gets published. Now, Renku itself is not the data repository. We don't want to make guarantees that we will keep the dataset around for 20 years and so on. So we would much rather have Renku be the place where you create the dataset, you work with the dataset, and where you can easily publish it to Zenodo or to somewhere else. You can easily import it from Zenodo. We can keep track of that, but we don't think it makes sense to have Renku datasets as such, because if it's actually a dataset like a curated collection of data with metadata, maybe something you want to cite in a paper, then it should be in a place like Dataverse or Zenodo or something like that. And yeah, if you just want to quickly move a file to this other project, I think like something like Scratch Space is much more suitable for that. So we kind of want to disentangle these two use cases to have like proper solutions for both of them instead of this mix as it is right now.
But then still the idea of tracking the changes on data. So I don't know, I envision like someone accessing one of these project like dashboards and realizing that someone also working on that project actually like generated like some new data on some of the data sources. And then the second person can update some results. I guess that's still ambition, no? Obviously. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it depends a bit exactly what use case we mean. We do want to, in the CLI, still have like like right now with Renku Run tracking outputs and inputs. though if I don't think we have really thought about how that might tie in with data sets. We have some ideas on how we can streamline that part of just tracking how stuff changed, so you don't need to define so many things on the CLI. But yeah, for the changes in the data set, that's, as Laura mentioned, we have the UX research coming up, and hopefully that will tell us more on what our users expect, what they need, and help us to then refine this concept.
Count me in. Thank you.
Yeah, if you have specific use cases in mind, that goes for anybody, and you don't want to dedicate a ton of time to take part in the UX research, you can also send us an email and just describe the use case. We'll be very grateful to have that input. As I think somewhere was mentioned that we have the design documents, and on those also you can comment and add your own use cases when those design documents are there.